Hello, I'm glad to be able to meet all of you. My name is Allison Wilson. At this present time, I'm a student pastor going through this ordination process with our church, PC USA. Before I get into today's sermon, I'm going to go ahead and read from the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 10, verses 12 through 21 to help prepare us as we come into this time of worship together. Let us begin. So now, O Israel, what does the Lord your God require of you? Only to fear the Lord your God, to walk in all his ways, to love him, to serve the Lord your God with all your heart and with all of your soul, and to keep the commandments of the Lord your God, and his decrees that I am commanding you today, for your own well-being. Although the heaven and the heaven of heavens belong to the Lord your God, the earth with all that is in it, yet the Lord set his heart and love on your ancestors alone, and chose you, their descendants, after them, out of all the peoples, as it is today. Circumcise then the foreskin of your heart, and do not be stubborn any longer. For the Lord your God is God of gods and Lord of lords, the great God, mighty and awesome, who is not particular and takes no bribe, who executes justice for the orphan and the widow, and who loves the strangers, providing them food and clothing. You shall also love the stranger, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. You shall fear the Lord your God, him alone you shall worship. To him you shall hold fast, and by his name you shall swear. He is your prize. He is your God, who has done for you these great and awesome things that your own eyes have seen. Your ancestors went down to Egypt, 70 persons, and now the Lord your God has made you as numerous as the stars in heaven. This ends our reading this morning. Thanks be to God. So, this is definitely a different kind of experience for me. I have not done too many virtual sermons before, but I am thankful to have the experience. I kind of do want to try out new things, and I'm hoping that this can probably become a regular practice for me moving forward, especially in this time of COVID and so much uncertainty and change. And I figured that this sermon, hopefully on strangers, and more important to the question, who is a stranger, might be able to enlighten you, to have a chance to know me, who will be a stranger, if given the opportunity to provide pastoral care to you and your church. So, I'm going to start off by wondering with you all, how often, and if there's any particular time in which you've felt scared and uncertain in the midst of a change in your own life experiences. Perhaps as a child, changing schools for the first time. There's some changes, like going from elementary school to middle school, that may have been exciting. It's a sign of you're growing up. You're moving from a little kid to now being this almost teenager. You're a bigger kid, you're showing that you're growing, you're maturing, you're becoming more and more of your own person. This change can be wonderful, but at the same time it can probably be a little bit scary going to a new school. After all, depending on the type of school, you might have some new students, you might have new teachers, and maybe that can be a little scary at times, not knowing if your teacher is going to be friendly or someone you may not feel like you're able to learn from. Maybe someone that you might be afraid of. And of course, not knowing if you do have some friends, if they'll be around, if they're in the same class, if you'll have time to talk, if you'll be able to hang out like you used to. There can be a lot of different changes moving up in school. And even though it might be a subtle fear, it can still be very present. And it might make you feel like you're a stranger in what may feel like once a familiar territory to you just a year ago. Now, some people, since I know that we don't all grow up the same way, some people can be homeschooled. So you may have had regular classes online. You may be used to your family teaching you the basic lessons that you go through in school, and maybe there might not feel like a whole lot of change there. But I'm sure that there are still some similarities in which we can still go through together, such as if you did some after online school activities, like maybe going to a soccer team and being part of a new team each year. Or if you were creative and you did art classes, or had some kind of after-schoolish kind of program, maybe Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts, and having different troop leaders. All these can be different subtle changes of uncertainty that a child can feel growing up. And then there's some families, such as mine, because I'm a military child, I've been used to having a parent whose job required me to move around quite often. Every so many years, we would end up having to pack our things and move to a whole new place, go to a whole new school, have to make a whole bunch of new friends. It can be a lot for a kid. I can recall a particular time. Let's see. I was about to start second grade, and we had just moved back from living overseas in Germany for 3 years. And I was about to start school, like it was the night before school started, and I was bawling in tears, just afraid of what tomorrow was going to bring, and being in a whole new school with so many people I didn't know. And I was afraid that I was not going to make any friends at all, because I had been living overseas for 3 years. I've watched different TV shows. I played different types of games. I've seen different traditions when it came to holidays and such. And I thought that the things that I knew was going to come across as so weird and so foreign to a lot of these peers of mine that I was afraid that I was not going to fit in at all, and that they would just see me as some weird person. So I told my mom my fear that night, and she, of course, did her best to comfort me, and she assured me that, you know, even though there might be some kids who are going to be thinking that I'd probably be weird because I did come from overseas, there would be still some people who would be interested in my stories, who might actually want to know what it's like to live in a different country, and that I would still be able to make friends despite having different experience in my life. And of course, she was right. After that day of classes starting and meeting all my new peers, my teachers, I felt like I was able to make a few friends right off the bat. It seemed like an easy transition for a second year student, a second grader. And of course, that's only one experience. Although I'm going to put a pin in that story, and we'll go on to our lesson this morning. I think that it's interesting how Moses kind of emphasizes the value of a stranger. And it does make me wonder, what kind of stranger is Moses talking about in this text? Is he talking about, and of course this need to recall, is he talking about this family's journey, starting with Abraham and his father, and their promise from God to just leave their homeland and to go into this wilderness in order to find this promised land that's been given to them. Because I'd imagine throughout all this family's journey, they probably felt like strangers in a strange land, always having to pick up, who knows after how many years or how many days or how many weeks, to go and see a new land, to keep wandering and to try to find this promise that God has given to them from generation to generation, that we know went to Isaac and to Jacob, that this tradition continued until it came to not Moses. Of course, the story is being told by Moses in this text. Joseph. Yeah. When Joseph got sold into slavery, that must have been a whole different experience of being a stranger in a strange land. I mean, he went from the complete bottom in the Egyptian society, from being a slave to, through God's grace, essentially becoming someone important, and his family is able to move in after him, after so much of an ordeal that the family has been through. That for the following generations, they've stayed in Egypt. They've called Egypt home. And they went, according to this text, from 70 people to as numerous as stars in heaven. They became a huge people, a number of people, because of God's blessing in its own way. However, I don't think that that's the only time that the Egyptian that they have felt like strangers in Egypt. Aside from just Joseph being a slave and, essentially an outsider who became a citizen through life circumstances in an unexpected way. But even for Moses' time, in that generation, being essentially treated like second-rate citizens in Egypt, being kind of like a workforce / indentured servants / maybe slaves. If you think about how they were treated in Egypt, even before then, their venture forward in 40 years in the desert, in the wilderness, they were once again strangers even in their own home. They had neighbors, Egyptians, who did not want to know about them, who didn't understand them, and were afraid of them. That's got to be very upsetting, to live in a place where you feel like your own stranger in your own backyard, and it's a place that you were born and grew up in. It must have been so challenging. And yet Moses calls the Israelites to remember, in this case, in my opinion, both times, that the Israelite people have been strangers in a strange land. To remember those minor fears of uncertainty, times that they felt like they didn't fit in, or didn't know how they fit in. I'd say, moving on with my one story, there was a move in which I had felt like a real stranger for the first time, apart from the time that we moved back to the U.S. from Germany. It wasn't a big move, it was a move from state to state. And for the first year of my school year, I wasn't able to make any friends. I spent the entire year trying, and at times probably acting like a bit of a fool, to make friends and to try to fit in. But when it came to like 5th grade and 6th grade, people already had their cliques. People already had an idea of who their friends are, and they decide whether outsiders fit in or not to their little quirky groups. And I say that because I think we all have our own little quirks at times. Things that make us stand out or unique. Things that we value. So, that was definitely a challenging time for me, and I felt like my mother's words when I was in the 2nd grade was almost ironic. That there would be someone who would be interested in learning about who I am. Someone who would want to be my friend, or try to even understand me. But the following year, I got used to the idea of just being by myself for the most part. Until the new school year started, and there was one particular person, a girl sitting next to me in my new class with my new teachers, and she started a conversation with me. She simply said, "Hello, my name is," in this case we'll name her Beth. Beth introduced herself, and she asked me what I thought that this new school year was going to be like, and what she was looking forward to, and wanted to know what I was thinking, and what would be cool with this new class, with this new teacher, what we could possibly learn. And just a simple act of kindness, a boldness from a stranger to a stranger, to start a conversation, that changed a lot. It helped me feel like I was finally a part of this community that I had just moved to, and spent a year feeling like an outsider. It's really nice to be able to know that there's people willing to be bold in times when we don't know if there's going to be room. And there's different reasons for why we are bold and willing to take a chance to get to know people around us. Sometimes we hope that nice things will happen if we're nice to others. And that does carry some truth, a grain of truth. But that's not quite what this text calls for when it comes to Moses, I think. I think that Moses is trying to call the Israelites to remember what it's like. To know what it's like for God to care for them in the midst of so much uncertainty. And to share that understanding, that gift of compassion with others. And that's how we can truly show God our thanks. By being able to say, "Hello, you're new. Can I get to know you?" One small act of kindness can change a whole lot. So as we move forward into a whole new year with COVID, hopefully we can find new ways to be bold. To be able to say hello to people that we probably haven't met or haven't spoken to for a long time. Technology is always changing. Although I also have heard a few news reports encouraging people to take a risk and be pen pals with strangers too. Little acts of kindness, little ways for people to connect. In the midst of so much uncertainty and so much social distancing, it's great to be able to find creative ways in order to say hello. And to let people know we care. We might not always be able to be present, but we care. And that feeling will never change. And I hope that this message encourages you to find your own creative way. You each have wonderful voices that God has blessed you each with to say hello. And I hope that this hello and thank you for spending time with me is a way for us to get to know a bit more about each other. Thank you all for your morning and spending time. And I pray that God may continue to bless you in all the ways in which God can. May the peace and love of Christ be with you all.